Alright, my little ponies, who's ready for a bedtime story? Let's continue with Forgetting Not by Noak Wolf. Actually, if I recall correctly, it was not a bedtime story at this point. It was getting very exciting. Our heroes, Lucy and Wester, had faced off against bandits in a storehouse, and in near mortal combat, they were victorious, securing the goods and their safety. Now, they were on their way to salvation. The night was still. Smoothly, the wind howled, stirring the dry, powder-like dirt of the wasteland ground. After the incident with the raiders, they moved on into the ruins of the old city, where they found temporary shelter. They had took shelter inside an old apartment complex near the outskirts of the city. The complex itself was simple, cozy, and protected. Holes were blasted through some sides of the walls. Old support beams above were split in two, while those beams that still stood seemed to be holding firmly the ceiling above them. They were on the second story of one of the apartments. There was a nice dry carpet and a few pieces of devastated furniture helping tie the place together. A small balcony was at the end of the room, giving the two an outside view of the area around them. Wester had lit a fire with low flames that produced little to no smoke. On top of the fire was a steel pot with the beans they had found earlier, bubbling softly. Wester was stirring the beans slowly, carefully making sure that all of the pot's contents were receiving the same amount of heat. Sitting near the fire, Lucky gazed at the low flames sadly. She firmly held a dirty old blanket around her body as a cool draft went through the building. Wester stopped stirring the food for a moment and turned to her. "Lucky, are you okay?" he asked. She looked up at him and shook her head.
I just feel sad.
Stirring the beans in the pot a few times, he asked, "What are you sad about?" Taking the blanket, she wrapped it around her more snugly.
I just don't want you to go.
He chuckled. "I'm not going anywhere anytime soon, kiddo." Lucky didn't reply, leaving a brief gap of silence between them. And, tapping the end of the spoon on the edge of the pot, he said, "Dinner's ready. Do you want some?" She nodded, retaining her sad expression. Pulling a bowl out of his bag, he poured some of the piping hot food into it. He slid it over to her and smiled at her warmly. "Eat up, kiddo. You'll need the energy." Taking the bowl with her hooves, she sat and began eating. Giving her a playful look, he said, "I know how to cheer you up. Will that make you feel better?" Cocking her head to the side, she gave him a puzzling look. "Well, I guess you'll need just that. After all, nothing fixes the blues like some good old cheering up." Lucky scooted over to the side of the fire to see what Wester was talking about. Quickly, he made his way over to an old television set that was against the wall. Fortunately for him, the giant piece of old-world technology had wheels. While not very good ones, it made it easier to move. A huge hole was blasted straight through it as he rolled it over to her. Taking the empty can of beans, he tossed it over to her. She caught it and peered at it oddly. Wester got behind the television set to see where she could see him through the hole. Pointing the empty can she held, he said, "That's the remote. Use it to change the stations." Lucky didn't reply. Holding the remote with both hooves, she pressed down on the can, making a clicking sound with her mouth. Wester then proceeded to make a whooshing noise to make it appear as if the television were changing channels. Standing up on the other side of the television, he started to speak in a dull tone. "Today's weather will be sunny. Maybe. With a slight chance of sunshine. Maybe. And then we'll have rain. Lots of rain. So pack your umbrellas, kids. It's going to be..." Lucky smiled and pressed the can again while making the same clicking sound once more. Wester changed moods instantly, as though another show was on, and in a serious voice, he acted as if he were in space. "Space, the final frontier. This is the voyage of the starship Galaxia. Its mission, to find new..."
Click.
she said, giggling. Quickly, Wester changed the way he acted and ducked low to the ground to the point where Lucky couldn't see him behind the television. "Film before a live studio audience," he said without showing himself. Within moments, he started to sing, "Sunday, Monday, happy days. Tuesday, Wednesday, happy days. Thursday, Friday, happy days. The weekend comes, my cycle hums. Ready to race to..." Pressing the can, she giggled once more.
Fast forward.
Wester began to act as if he were moving fast, and pressing the can, she laughed.
Play.
She chuckled. Wester quickly started to pretend he was in the show. "Well, how are you doing today?" "Terrible," he replied to himself. "Becky just took my wagon." He gasped. "Whoa there, partner. You? And Becky? There's a shocking thought." Putting his hoof to the side of his mouth, he made a low, laughing sound as though the audience were laughing. Lucky started laughing at the stallion's antics. Only after a few seconds of laughing, she began to cough roughly. Wester stopped what he was doing instantly and came to her worryingly. Resting a hoof on her forehead, he asked, "Are you okay? Do you have a fever or are you choking on something? Or..." She playfully nudged him back and giggled.
I'm fine. Some of that bean juice just made me cough.
He wiped his brow in relief and sat next to her. "Well, I'm glad you're okay. Did you like that? Or was it too much?" She snuggled next to him with the blanket wrapped around her.
Yeah, I like the one about the pony and Becky.
"I like that too," he cooed, putting a hoof on her head and ruffling her mane. After he ruffled her mane, she rested her head against his foreleg.
Wester?
He looked down at her.
You've told me that you can't use magic because it hurts you. Why does it hurt you?
He took his free hoof and rubbed the back of his neck unsurely. "Well, I'm not sure you want to hear that story." She nuzzled his foreleg, closing her eyes, before giving him a sweet yawn.
I want to hear it, though.
"Well," he hummed in thought, "I guess you deserve to know." She started to gently breathe and listen to his story. "When I was a younger buck, me and a few friends of mine went traveling, until one day we stumbled upon a group of raiders outside of this old factory. We fought them pretty well. My buddies had the other raiders, but I was fighting this one raider that strayed off from the main group. He was pretty tough, and he gave me some serious knocks to the head. It turns out that the factory we were fighting in was filled with barrels full of tainted gum. He thought it was a good idea to stick my head in it. I tried to fight back against him, but he managed to get most of my horn in it. Ever since then, my magic's been strong, but it costs me. Ever since then, my magic's been strong, but it costs me."
Will you ever get better?
She muttered tiredly. He smiled contentedly at her, brushing a little of her yellow mane to the side. "I hope so. Maybe your uncle at Iron State can fix me."
I hope it does. Then you won't get hurt anymore.
"I hope he does, too."
Wester?
She asked once more. "Yeah, kiddo?"
Can you sing that song for me? That song you were singing when you found me?
"Sure." For some reason, he found it hard to sing the song she had mentioned at first. Sighing heavily, he built up the nerve to start singing gently to her. "Here I stroll down this lonely road, searching for a home. Then I found you all alone, soaked to the bone. We ran on through the world together, seeing a world I never saw. Oh, we made up new numbers, and we gazed upon the water in everlasting awe. Here I stroll down the road. I'm not lonely or sad or mean. Now we walk on through the days like an everlasting dream." Small, soft snores came from her as she drifted off to sleep, with her head resting on his leg. He looked down at her and smiled, feeling a wonderful warmness fill his chest. "Good night, Lucky. Get your rest. We've got a long day ahead of us," he whispered, letting her sleep soundly. The sound of soft clinging metal caused Lucky's ears to twitch. At first, the sound didn't bother her, but as a chilling breeze brushed against her gray coat, she shivered. She tried to pull the blanket she had wrapped around her tighter to prevent the breeze from hitting her. Sadly, a combination of both the draft and the rattling metal had finally woken her up. She sat up, rubbing her eyes sleepily, smacking her mouth. She could tell her mouth was slightly dry.
"Wester?"
she cooed tiredly. Scanning the room around her, Wester was next to the balcony, packing their things inside their bags. By the way things looked, Wester seemed to be almost done packing their things. The last few items that he was packing were the pot and bowls along with the group of papers with pens. As he packed the pot, it clanked loudly. At the very least, this explained where the rattling was coming from. The once warm, comforting fire was now reduced to nothing more than a charred, smoldering collection of blackened wood. Tiny bits of smoke rose up from the smoldering pit, as a few embers kept what was left of the fire burning. Wester noticed that Lucky was up, and quickly put the last bowl inside his bag. "Did I wake you up, kiddo? If you want to sleep a little longer, I can give you a little more time to."
No.
She yawned, stretching out her forelegs.
"I'm up."
He smiled at her, putting his saddlebag on his back. "I didn't sleep too well last night, so I got up earlier and started packing us up." Taking the blanket she used to sleep with, she handed it over to Wester. "Did you sleep well?" Wester asked. Lucky took her hoof and rubbed the side of her head, which felt slightly sore.
"I slept okay. My head kind of hurts, though."
He kneeled down to her. "You probably slept on it wrong, but that's okay. It'll go away in a little bit." She blinked at him. In his eyes, she could tell he had something interesting to share.
"Sure."
"Hey, you want to see something cool?" The thought of what this cool thing was intrigued her.
"Sure. What is it?"
Motioning for her to follow him, he led her to the balcony of the old abandoned apartments. Unlike the night before, the whole area around them was now visible. As gray light from the twisted cloud cover above illuminated the world around them. For miles, land that was once consumed by darkness was now visible. The ruins of an old city surrounded them. Taller 3 to 4 story brick buildings lined the edges of the cracked streets, filled with rusty wagons from days long since past. In the distance was a large yellow antenna, one that looked as if it broadcasted some kind of signal out into the wasteland. Wester pointed to the distant yellow landmark. "You see that?" Lucky nodded at him, seeing the antenna in the distance. "That's our destination, Ironstead. If what I've heard about that town is true, it should be protected enough from raiders, which means that your uncle should be there safe and sound."
"How far away is it, Wester?"
"Hopefully not far. It's near the center of the city, and by the way the land around here looks, we'll have to do some exploring to get around some of the more blocked areas." A sense of excitement filled the filly's heart. The very thought of her uncle warmed her, because after their long trip, this was the end, the final stretch of their journey, and nothing would get in their way of reaching Ironstead. Patting her lightly on the back, Wester playfully chuckled. "Come on, kiddo, let's go. If we move quickly, we should make it there in no time. And who knows, those swirly pink cupcakes just might be there waiting for us." Most of the time, they did find alternate routes, though it just made their job of reaching town that much more of a challenge. It didn't take them too long to reach the main street of the city. Following the road straight down would take them right to the city's center. Trotting along the sidewalk, echoing metal bounced off the pre-war structures. Eerie was the whole city, and the bleak lack of sound fueled this strange feeling. Wester kept in mind that even though all was quiet, at any sudden moment, that silence could easily be broken by the sounds of gunfire. Every now and again, he would scan the area around him carefully while they moved. To him, it was very reassuring to have some understanding of the environment around them. Just because this was their final stretch didn't exempt them from being attacked at any moment. To their right was an old corner store. Like most of the other buildings in the city, it too was a damaged, deteriorating building of the wastes. Near the store's entrance was a beaten-up sparkle cola machine. Smaller dents covered the sides, along with cherry red chip paint peeling off its front. The light over the machine, which advertised the product, flickered sporadically. Wester stopped and glanced at the machine. "Here, Lucky, are you thirsty?" She paused too, turning her attention to the machine he was looking at. Her mouth was dry, and looking at the machine near the store's entrance did seem inviting.
"Do you think the machine still works?"
she asked. Wester shrugged. "It wouldn't hurt to find out, would it?" He nudged her gently. "Let's go take a peek. Maybe there's still some cola inside." They both came over to the machine. Dirt-stained broken glass crunched underneath their hooves as the machine made a low, almost daunting humming sound. Wester rubbed confidently, his hooves together, peering down to the filly at his side. "Watch a pro in action, kiddo," Wester boastfully said, taking the knife from his side. Holding the blade firmly in his mouth, he stuck the end in a groove along the side of the machine. All the while, he muttered to himself as he attempted to pry the machine open. Pulling hard, the machine ached and moaned metallically. He grunted, applying more direct force to the machine's opening groove. Lucky observed him uneasily, and stepping up to him, she asked,
"Do you need any help?"
He raised a hoof up to her and shook his head, keeping the knife dug firmly into the machine. "Nah, I'm good. Just give me a second," he tiredly uttered. With a few more good pulls, a loud snap made both of them jump slightly. The loud noise they had heard, however, was followed by the machine's door creaking, with the now open coal machine ready to be looted. With one hoof, he pushed the coal machine's door to the side, exposing the inner workings of the contraption. Both ponies stared disappointingly into it. Rusted gears and valves filled the machine, and what little soda was left wasn't even soda. It was just bottles. Dusty old bottles that were empty and dry. Rubbing the top of Lucky's head, he flattened his ears mournfully. Sorry, kiddo. Looks like we won't get to drink anything till we get there." No sooner had he said that her eyes got wide with excitement. For near the end of the mess of bottles looked like a brown bottle, filled with some kind of liquid. She reached inside, and in her hooves she held a full bottle of sparkle cola. Wester stood there baffled by the sight. He grinned an embarrassed grin while scratching his thick brown mane on his head. "Well, shoot, I'm getting old if I didn't see that. They say the first signs of old age is blindness after all." Twisting the cap off the bottle's top, a crisp, satisfying hiss graced their ears. Bubbles formed near the top of the inside of the bottle, not before quickly returning to the normal brown fizzy liquid it once was. "Drink it up. You found it. You deserve it," Wester admirably added. She glanced down at the bubbling drink and shook her head, raising it up to him.
"I won't have any unless you have some too."
Wester was slightly taken aback by her response. "I'm fine, kiddo. You found it. It's yours."
"No,"
she insisted.
"You opened the machine, so you get some too."
"Well, shucks, kid." He smiled thankfully before picking up the drink with one hoof. "You know, you could still have had the whole thing." She shook her head at him, giving him wide, sparkle-filled eyes.
"I know, but you deserve some too. You're my friend, and my friends get to share what we have."
"You're a sweet kid. You know that?" he replied, taking a few sips of the carrot-flavored beverage. He sighed blissfully before taking his last few sips.
See? We share what we've got,
she said, taking a few large gulps of the soda herself. Before they knew it, the bottle was empty. She sighed contentedly, feeling the carbonated drink tickle her belly. Dropping the now empty bottle on the ground, they moved on. As they trotted off down the street, Wester kicked the bottle to the side. Next time, we'll have to make them last longer than that, lest we get infected with the hiccups. They both chuckled softly to themselves as they continued onward down the main street of the city. Overhead, the clouds twisted. The sound of thunder echoed in the far-off distance, breaking the eerie silence of the ruined city. Well, this has been a very exciting story, but I think we should pause it for here. So I hope you enjoyed this time, my little ponies, and I wish you a good night. May you see Princess Luna in your sweet dreams.